My name is Orlagh and I have over 20 years experience in HR across retail, FMCG and financial services organisations. I mainly work with organisations undergoing significant transformation where I love to help the businesses transform their commercial performance through accessing the capability of their people. So I spent my first year post-university in general management in retail and discovered that I loved working with people, and that made me think about going into personnel and training as was. I joined the Tesco Graduate Management Training Scheme, which was an amazing foundation, and I have been lucky enough to love what I do and progress through increasingly senior roles and lots of different sectors, helping organisations to help their people flourish. I have a deeply held belief that it is possible for individuals to flourish within organisations, and I think that HR can play a really critical role in helping to create the climate and conditions that make that happen. I think that's fundamentally about having the right leaders, leading in the right way in the organisation. And so that's the kind of work I've sought to do through different sectors. I think it's really important to work for great bosses who believe in the possibilities for the people in that organisation. And I've been lucky enough to do that in increasingly senior roles across a number of countries. I never had a formal career path. I loved doing what I did. So I've maybe looked at my boss's job and thought that looks interesting, and over time that's evolved to me being the Group HR Director at RSA and more recently the Chief People Officer at AIB. So I've been part of two major business turnarounds, both at RSA and at AIB. When I joined both businesses, they were making significant losses. In RSA, it wasn't clear whether or not the business would continue. It needed, radical amounts of capital added. When I joined AIB, it was 99.8% state-owned and doesn't get much more state-owned than that. And I came in as part of a management team with a very clear plan to turn around that business performance, and we did successfully in both cases. In RSA, we went from stabilising the business to then looking at organic growth, and we managed to grow on average 8% over the time year on year that I was there. So very significant turnarounds, and all done by accessing the quality of the people that worked within that organisation. So it was done in a way that was sustainable and involved the organisation rather than merely a financial turnaround. Well, I've had the benefit of lots of 360 over the years, the gifts of feedback. So I am generally described as somebody who likes building diverse and passionate teams. I am very clear about a vision and where I want to go, and I see it as my role to instill that passion and belief into the team that work for me, and then give them freedom to work their magic. So I'm not somebody who likes to micromanage the details. I believe that's the gift that those folks have come in to bring. I'm hugely driven, I'm optimistic, I can always see a path through. No matter how dark the day, there's always a way to get things done. And I hopefully inspire people, and I'm quite irreverent, so we normally have a laugh along the way. So I think there are lots of business challenges. I think in traditional industries, there's the threat coming in from the data-driven new organisations that are looking to kind of eat the lunches of insurance companies and banks using data. So something like Airbnb coming from nowhere to suddenly bigger than the classic hotel chains. And so there's these group of organisations that are described as exponential, which I think are big challenges to traditional sectors, and working out how you can respond to that and create that more agile organisation and that more agile culture and leadership is going to be a big opportunity for traditional businesses. I think the level of political instability is very significant, and how businesses respond to that and see that as challenges. And I think having a very diverse workforce, you're going to have multiple generations in the workforce that we need to appeal to, with us all needing to work longer, unfortunately. My dream of retiring at 50 to the Caribbean is just a dream. And so how do we set ourselves up to have employment offerings that are interesting, whether you're a millennial entering the workforce or a baby boomer looking to maybe work part-time and continue to earn for longer. So I think that's going to be a really interesting leadership challenge for us all. Well, I think that at the heart, there's going to be a talent and capability question that comes up. So we're all going to be competing for the folks who are able to work in this data-driven way. So the analytics is a talent pool that's very shallow, and are you going to work for a traditional bank or for Google? So there are some very significant challenges. But I think on a more macro level, the leadership climate that you need to be able to create where you're trying to have a more agile organization is a big challenge if you've grown up maybe with a different leadership mindset. And that's going to be required whether you're looking at dealing with economic conditions that are changing very quickly, if you're looking at dealing with multiple age groups in the workforce, or you're operating in an exponential world where resources are outside the organization as well as in, whether you're dealing with kind of crowdsourcing solutions. So that way of accessing the capability of those that exist within and outside the organization is a very different leadership mindset. So I think some really kick-ass HR functions that can help create that climate, who can inspire leaders to work in that way, will be massively important to the organizations that they work in. And I'm firmly of the belief that chief execs get the HR director they deserve. So I think it's about creating a platform where the business and people strategy is absolutely aligned, where the chief exec and leadership team are active sponsors of the people agenda and see that creating sustainable cultures and organizations are part of creating sustainable businesses. They're not something that you want to do as two separate pieces. So I've worked for very different characters over my career, but the most enjoyable times have been when we've been in a partnership with a chief exec or a head of function, and you're absolutely side by side creating change and making sure that people are with you. So I think that's at the root of it all. I think there's a challenge, which is making sure that we're accessing all the capability that exists within organizations. So I think that's the first role of a leader when you inherit a team, is to truly look deeply at the individuals within that team and work out what it is that they can bring, because people may be being boxed into a smaller box based on a job title. So as you arrive into a team, understanding what capability truly exists, what magic you could set free in that team, then starting to look and think, well, where are the gaps and where are the people that maybe aren't doing as good a job as I might want, helping them be coached to be better or move on, and then looking at where else could I get that capability, and having a mindset of a kind of a talent scout, so whether that's within the broader organization or outside, always knowing where the best people with particular skills are. And as I said, there are going to be lots of rare skills that lots of people are competing for. So having that kind of talent mindset throughout the organization, both within the HR function, but much more generally across the board, where leaders see that as something that they're trying to do. They're trying to get the best talent for both their team and the broader organization as a core part of their job. Football managers are out scouting all the time, trying to find great people. They're not relying on the people, whose job it is to look at that solely. And I think that's the kind of mindset you want to have in your organization. I think it's a no-brainer. I think, if we're all going to be working till we're 70, we need to have different patterns. And I think there are different times in our lives, whether that's about, having lots of maybe interests in your 20s, being knackered and having young kids in your 30s, in your 40s, potentially looking after aging parents. There's lots of different points in our careers when we need to be able to work in a way that measures the output. And, the bosses I've worked for have generally been great about that. So I have a young family, and so long as I get everything done, they're less concerned about the hours in which I'm doing it, and the flexibility to go and look at sports days and things is really important. And actually that matters enormously to me, so they will get huge amounts back from me because of that flexibility. And that's how I seek to lead in the department. I encourage people to do further education, to pursue their interests, because I know that that means that the hours they're working for me, they're going to be truly energised. But as I said, in a context of a career that's going to span a much longer period of time, we need to be able to dip in and out and work at different paces and different rates. So I think you're dead in the water if that's not how you operate. This is one of these very thorny subjects, and I know that lots of women are really anti-quotas, but I think in order to force change, we either wait 100 years and hope that natural selection will sort it out, or you actually have to force it. So whether it's by quotas or targets, I think the kind of comply or explain has actually worked pretty well in the UK. My experience in Ireland is the diversity agenda is much less advanced, and therefore it's something that I'm actively looking at moving forward with the 30% club here. So yeah, I mean, I personally think if you're going to force change, then there needs to be some level of support for that. I think there's a recent study through the 30% club that talks about corporate governance as the most effective way of doing that rather than full-on quotas. So again, this kind of having to explain from a governance standpoint. But it stands to reason that a more diverse group of people will be better representatives of the customers that you're ultimately serving and the people that work within your organisation. So yes, I'm a big fan of diversity and inclusion because I think it comes from the same place about flourishing. It says we actually want to have an organisation where everybody can be at their best and bring all of themselves to work. And if you can create that kind of climate and make sure that comes up through the organisation, then I think you will end up ultimately making better business decisions, and there's lots of data that supports that. So in terms of my next phase, I've been in big corporate HR roles for the last 20 years, and I'm now experimenting with going out on my own and looking at how I might help a broader range of organisations with the kind of change and transformation and leadership challenges than just working within the boundaries of one. And the hope is that that will also help with me having increasing amount of time with my young family. But check back in 12 months as to whether or not that's actually come to pass. My advice for people starting out is that I think it's really important to have a good grounding in all of the disciplines. As you get increasingly more senior, things like reward are incredibly important, which maybe weren't at the early stages of my career. Build great relationships. Ultimately, we're a people business, so making sure that you have strong relationships across all levels within the organisation and you know what's actually landing well and what is just rhetoric is important. I think part of that is your role as coach for the leaders that you support, being willing to be the one that tells them when it isn't working, being willing to give them the feedback that says their behaviours weren't brilliant, and being prepared to be the person who stands as the smelly kid in the corner for a period when they're not that thrilled with that feedback is pretty important. And I think believe in the possibilities. So I think we have such a great opportunity in HR to believe what is possible for that organisation and the people that work there. So holding on to that optimism and hope, regardless of some of the stuff that's going on day to day, and ploughing that sort of future furrow and making sure that that's where we're aiming for is incredibly important, and just loving what you do, because it's a lot easier to come in and work hard when you love what you do.